Hello and welcome on ThePapare.com. Here we are yet again with another episode of the Last Dance review series with ThePapare.com. We hope that you caught up with our first and second episodes of the review series, where we went on to review the first and the second and the third and the fourth episodes of the documentary respectively. And today we are here to review the fifth and the sixth episodes, which were released last week, mainly discussing around the areas of Kobe Bryant, the Dream Team, then the media scrutiny that Michael Jordan had to face with his gambling problems, rather media created gambling problems. So we'll take a look at this. We'll review these two episodes and see what we can add on to the global conversation that is happening around this documentary. To continue this conversation, of course, I have three gentlemen joining with me today. Mafaz and Nawud with me joining with me as usual, and as the guests we have Shanaka Amarasinghe joining today. Welcome on the show, Shanaka, and a very warm welcome to Nawud and Mafaz too. Before moving on to the big questions, let's first go on to Shanaka. I'm just going to recall what Mafaz said in the first episode about the Colombo Bulls, who started after Chicago Bulls, and the fame coming to Sri Lanka and people getting the Sri Lankan basketball people getting to know about this entire team. In 1989, Colombo Bulls were formed after the Chicago Bulls. And even in that first episode, I said that I was just merely 3 years old when everything was happening. So when I look back today, it's all legends and stories for me. But Shanaka, from a different generation, of course. So we would like to know how your thoughts on it, and how did y'all feel this Chicago Bulls fame here in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, thanks for making me feel old, Lelu. But yeah, it was a really interesting time, because I think we got a TV at home in about 1983, 84 perhaps. And the programming was obviously not something that you could engage with an outside audience. Like you could not see stuff from abroad early on. And it was only through the newspapers and stuff that we found out there was this guy called Michael Jordan who was taking the world by storm. So now there's the highlight clips and all the stuff that you guys can download and watch. We didn't have all that back then. But the legend slowly grew from 1984. We remember that he didn't really win anything until the early 90s. So he was around for a long time, for about 7 years, as the best player in the world before actually starting to win. And it was in those final series with Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons that he really came into prominence, and the Bulls really became one of these teams that were looked up to. And it was about that time that the Colombo Bulls started. I think the Colombo Basketball Club already existed, so it kind of started off as a team to rival that team. And those were the guys that played in all the finals, the Colombo Bulls versus Colombo BC. That's what it used to be all the time. And you would see the same players at national practice. You would see them in the mercantile tournaments as well. And these were the guys that we used to look up to. Obviously, we look up to the Michael Jordans of this world, but from a local perspective, these were the guys guys like Lucinda Silva, Arcela, all these guys, the big men who were probably Michael Jordan's height, really. And they were the big men here, but they would have been point guards back in the NBA. So we really embraced the culture at that time, the Colombo Bulls. And I think if somebody starts up a basketball club now, it'll probably be called something the Morella Warriors or something like that. So that's really how it started out. And I remember those times with a lot of fondness.
Interesting conversation on how Sri Lanka embraced the Chicago Bulls fame. Well, let's move on to the big questions. I think we'll start off with the debate about Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. I'll move on to Mafaz first. The question that I have, and to set the tone, Mafaz, from what I feel is, going up there to where Michael Jordan is performing is hard, but the even harder part is keeping up that consistency, a consistent straight line to perform at your level best over and over and over again. And while this is happening, there is a debate: is Kobe Bryant similar to Michael Jordan? Is LeBron James similar to Michael Jordan? Are they better? But this documentary itself, they discuss this in a very slight way. So what are your thoughts on this, in this popular debate? Is Kobe Bryant actually better than Michael Jordan, or Michael Jordan is better than Kobe Bryant?
Hello everyone, thanks for having me on the show once again. So yeah, the fifth and sixth episodes, especially the fifth episode, was dedicated to the late Kobe Bryant, and there were few cuts on his take on how he was. How did he embrace the culture of Michael Jordan's work ethic, and how did Jordan help him as a elder brother in order to improve in the NBA? So, taking the question you gave me, whether Kobe or Michael Jordan was the better player. So for me, I think comparing players or comparing eras is a very tough thing, because you should appreciate all these players, the ability, the skill they had, and the way they performed. But like looking into it, analyzing it a bit further, I think Kobe had a tougher challenge than MJ when it comparing to the eras, the number of players he had to face, especially the guard matchups. I guess Kobe had to like go against a prime Dwayne Wade and a young LeBron, and probably T Mac, the likes of T Mac. These all were like prime in their prime. They were really tough matchups for Kobe. And also, I think his last two rings, which he won in 2009 and 2010, I believe, was on his own basically, and he had to pull the team in a very tough Western Conference. And also, I think Jordan's playoff record without Scottie Pippen isn't that a good a record when it's compared to what Kobe had. And I believe Kobe's uh, the situations in clutch situations, I think Kobe had a lot of game winners than Michael Jordan. So when you compare these kind of stats, I believe Kobe had a better record than MJ. But once again, coming back to the debate, who was the better player? I think it's a tough question to answer, because these were two eras basically, and skill-wise, I think everybody believed that Michael Jordan passed the torch to Kobe Bryant at that time during that last All-Star game, when it was Jordan's last All-Star game while Kobe was debuting on his first All-Star game. So everybody wanted to see the same Michael Jordan kind of play in Kobe Bryant, and that was what even Kobe said later on, that uh, his, he attributed his 5 rings to Michael Jordan, saying that without Michael, I wouldn't have 5 rings. So here it goes. I think it's correctly said. Basically, Michael Jordan passed the torch on to Kobe, and Kobe went on to become one of the best players in the NBA.
I'll take the start for the next question for Shanaka from that conversation where Kobe actually goes on to tell, all those 5 rings is a tribute to Michael Jordan as well, because if he wasn't there, Kobe wouldn't have actually gone on to achieve all those. He was a big guidance. And in that same little passage of video, Shanaka, Kobe goes on to say that, a lot of people say have a one-on-one with Michael Jordan, see who wins, but he says he doesn't want to do it. Debate about Kobe versus Michael Jordan, but my question is, if that one-on-one was played, who do you think would win?
Well, it's impossible to say because there's about 15 to 20 years in between the two. I think Kobe Bryant is closer to my age when he died, so he would have been just about in his early 40s. So when he was growing up, he would have also been that 6-year-old kid that was watching Michael Jordan come into the NBA. And when he won his first title, Kobe would have been about 10 or 12 years old as well. So coming into that first All-Star game in 1998 for him, he would have been coming up against an idol. He wouldn't have even known that he would ever be on the same court with this guy. So imagine the starstruck nature of a 19-year-old Kobe Bryant. And it's really one of the few areas, I think, in his personality that Michael Jordan was able to take this guy under his wing, because a lot of the players who played alongside him, he would compete with. He wouldn't give them a chance in hell. He would just go at them from the start. You saw it with that whole Tony Kukoc thing. He would take everything personally. If another player was good, he would take that as a personal insult and he would go at this guy. But with the age difference, I think Michael Jordan kind of realized that this Kobe Bryant guy is not going to be a threat immediately, and he may be the next superstar. Let me mentor him a little bit. And I think that was great for basketball that Michael Jordan decided to do that, because as Mafaz said, and as the documentary alludes to, we may not have seen the Kobe Bryant we saw if not for Michael Jordan. So there's a lot that I think players can learn from people who have gone before them. And obviously Michael Jordan was a good teacher. But one thing that both these guys shared was the kind of work ethic, Lelu. And what people don't realize about Michael Jordan was he was not just flash. If you look at all the game winners that he, most of the game winners that he hit, we remember the whole, dunking from the free throw line kind of Michael Jordan. But if you look at a lot of the plays that he made, there are lots of turnaround jumpers, there are lots of mid-range jumpers, there are lots of drives to the basket when he's getting hammered and still managing to finish. So his basics were really absolutely outstanding, and he worked so hard on that game. It was not just a career of slam dunks, and that's exactly what Kobe did as well. He worked so hard on his game, and he managed in the end to make sure that he had an unstoppable jumper, and that's what made these two guys just a cut above everyone else, was the work ethic and the amount of time and dedication and commitment that they put onto the court. I would not hazard a guess as to who will win that one-on-one game. I think Kobe might have a couple of inches in reach as well. But if you put them both together and say, you're both 25 years old, let's play a game, I think Michael Jordan will probably take that game, but that's just probably my bias.
So Michael Jordan is the better player. Is it up for debate? Of course. Let me steer this conversation a bit away and throw in a scenario for Navod into the debate. Now we know Air Jordans, the series of shoes by Nike for Jordan when they signed him on, and we know that Kobe also has his own series in terms of Nike. So coming from a corporate level, do you think Nike saw them as equals and that's why they went on to create the same series? What's your take? Are they equal? Debate about it.
Well, Lelu, I think signing Jordan was a turning point for Nike as a company, and from there onwards, it just the revenues just grew, and everything went away for Nike. And as you see in the documentary, they say, Converse was the official sneaker brand for NBA. Then the second choice for Jordan was Adidas, but Nike was an up and coming company, and they got hold of Jordan, and again they didn't have much expectations. Just they wanted at the end of the first year around 3 to 4 million, but by the end of the first year, I think they've sold over 100 million worth of sneakers. So that really grew, and through, I think, mainly because of Jordan's expansive play, the eye-catching play that Jordan had really talked to the fans, and through that, what I can say, cultural phenomenon that started with being like Mike and the must-have sneakers, because you see in that documentary people lining up to buy the sneakers. So, and also from what Spike Lee did with his commercials as well. So again, around that, apart from the stuff that Jordan did on the court, that really spoke volumes in terms of bringing in that revenue and creating that brand for him and the Air Jordans, as well as that culture that grew in the early late 80s, the 90s, and quite brilliantly.
Well, Navod, very slightly evaded my question on comparing Kobe Bryant. Probably he's also biased to Michael Jordan and thinks that Jordans are better than the shoe series. But I leave the debate as it is open for our viewers as well. Moving on to the next big thing that this documentary discusses, the Dream Team. Up until then, the USA was not doing really well in the international basketball scene as far as Olympics were concerned, and then they take a decision to enter these professionals who are playing this professional league into the system and see whether they can go on to win a medal. Well, it's been a huge success, and up to this date, when the LeBron James, Kobe Bryant himself, and Kevin Durant, and they play. They are an invincible team even up to date. So that decision really worked for USA. Mafaz, what I want to know is why do you think that they didn't take that decision earlier when there were many great players who played the league before Michael Jordan as well, when their presence was there? Why didn't they take that decision back then? And how do you think that decision affected after Michael Jordan and the rest of the players were included in the Dream Team?
Lelum, I think NBA players were not allowed to take part in the Olympics till 1989, till FIBA officially approved NBA players to enter the Olympics only in 1989. So I think that was the reason the USA didn't field NBA players till that point. But once it was approved, the 1992 the Barcelona games, I think there was the option to enter the NBA players, and this is where when the NBA decided that they are going to get the NBA players involved in the Olympic Games. So moving on, the selection criteria, there were many debates on who should be in the team and not. And since this was the first time, I think they just handpicked the team with a few selectors over there, and which included some of the NBA administrators as well as the USA basketball administrators. In terms of selection, I guess there was a huge debate on certain why Isaiah Thomas was not on the team. He was actually an all-star starter that year, and he was the only all-star starter who was left out of the squad. And his on-field problems with some of the main players on that team, I think, led to his omission. Though in the documentary, Michael Jordan denies that he had anything to play with it, but it's obvious that his on-field problems led to his omission on that side. And in terms of the Dream Team, I guess it entirely this changed the field of how people people actually started to embrace the NBA more and more, since this is the first time outside the USA the fans started to see the actual NBA players playing in the Olympic Games. And I think the way they went about it, even if you see in the documentary during the practice sessions, how intense it was, and the likes of Magic Johnson provoking Michael Jordan during practice sessions to do better. And that's how Michael Jordan decided that he's going to be the leader of the team, though he was reluctant to take part in the team as well. So apparently the Magic Johnson actually persuaded Michael Jordan that he should lead from the front, and this is his team. And during those practice sessions, and by the time the first game was played, he cemented that he's the number one player in the team, and he went on to win the gold medal with Team USA. And another interesting fact here is the opponents which they had to play in the finals. That was Croatia at that time. I think they had the best European player in Toni Kukoc, and how Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen went off. They really made it hard for Tony, since they knew that Jerry Krause was very fond of Toni Kukoc, and he wanted him badly in the Bulls roster. And he he ensured this along with Scotty that he gives Tony back what he deserves because they had a personal grudge with Jerry Krause. So there were interesting stories behind this dream team, but end of the day, I think the NBA showed that the world that what they are really are, and that was, I think, the best ever uh, this USA team to take part in Olympic Games.
Jerry was an interesting man indeed. He never fails to amaze us in every episode of the documentary. But I'll take a few points of that opinion from first to throw in a question to Shanaka. Isaiah Thomas, Magic Johnson, and the little grudge between Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas. Now, even up to this day, that grudge is there. If you just look at the documentary, that's quite evident. But at the end of the day, the pinnacle of any sportsman is to go and represent your country. Does it actually matter? Grudges matter when you go out there to represent your country and win a medal. That is one part of the question, Shanaka. Then secondly, you see Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan having a very great relationship between them as players. But why do you think, what's the difference between them? Why Michael Jordan is different with Isaiah Thomas, and why Michael Jordan is different with Magic Johnson? And one difference eventually leads one player not being able to represent the country as well, a talented player. How do you see this and your views on the Dream Team?
Well, let's put it this way, and we'll talk about Sam Smith's book, The Jordan Rules, later. But Michael Jordan is a brilliant basketball player, was a brilliant basketball player, probably the best sportsman ever that I have ever seen in any kind of sport. But sometimes when you get to that position, it's very difficult to remain a nice guy. And I think there is a lot of that's kind of a subtext of this documentary as well. And if you look between the lines, you can see that. So the difference between, I think, Kobe Bryant, who we discussed earlier, and Michael was so willing to pass on the baton to him was because he was from a different era and Michael was not going to be competing with him. And then, of course, Magic Johnson had his run. He was the Lakers' Showtime. He was the Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. So he had his run, and by the time it came to like the late 80s, the Lakers were on the downward trend, and Magic Johnson was no longer a threat. I think he'd just been announced as HIV positive, and at that time that was a huge deal, and they were wondering whether he could continue and stuff like that. So Magic was on the down low as well. So Jordan kind of rode the wave in between Magic Johnson and Kobe Bryant. But the difference with Isaiah Thomas was the guy who prevented him from winning 2 championships. And they played the Pistons in those 2 series in 89 and 90. And those were brutal series. I remember that Pistons did really well. Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumas, Dennis Rodman, Lambier, all these guys wanted a piece of Michael Jordan, and they got it. And by that time, Michael Jordan was already the established superstar, and this team somehow managed to beat them. And honestly, I think more than anything else, more than any kind of walking off the court before the match was over or something, I think Michael could just not forgive the fact that the Pistons had come out, played what they called dirty basketball at that point in time. They were playing very, very physical. So I think Michael never forgave Isaiah Thomas for depriving him of those, for what he thinks is depriving him of those 2 championships. So I think that's where the animosity really started. But also, that being said, Isaiah Thomas was no big kindergarten teacher either. I mean, he went toe-to-toe with these guys. So this is the best player in the world. This is how we take him down. And there was no love lost between them. He had his problems with Magic. He had his problems with Larry Bird as well. So as Michael says, it wasn't just me. They want to pin it on me. That's fine. But nobody else wanted him in the team. And I guess when you're a coach and you look at, a star player, and he has a negative effect on all my other star players, how are you going to look at that? You're not going to take him on the tour. So if you're going to take Isaiah Thomas, if it was Michael Jordan and he had a problem with everyone else in the team, you'd still take him. But it was Isaiah Thomas. They already had a point guard in Magic Johnson. So they were not going to risk taking Isaiah and having a bust up on the team, because more than anything else, I think what we need to remember was that the Dream Team was also a political statement. This was just after the whole Cold War with Russia, where Yugoslavia, who were from the Eastern European bloc of states, kept winning the basketball gold medal. They wanted to make a statement, and they wanted to announce to the world that they were the best team. So they didn't want to have any kind of bust ups in the team, any bad press. And keeping Isaiah at home was something that would help them to maintain that side of things as well. But bringing that dream team to the forefront, making sure that they lobbied, managed to get professional athletes back into the Olympic Games. That was a huge step, guys. So I think that the 92 basketball team, apart from the fact that it was probably the greatest collection of basketball athletes ever, it was also a very big political statement, and the omission of Isaiah probably had a bit to do with the fact that it was a political issue as well.
Let me move on to Navod, and when moving on, Navod, I would like an opinion from a fan perspective of the Dream Team. Let's take away the political controversies, the selection controversies, and everything, and leave aside everything, and you just take the Dream Team, looking at players playing top quality basketball at the Olympic stage, and just entertaining the crowd, and creating so much pure love for the game. From a fan perspective, if you leave all those controversies aside, how you see this Dream Team in basketball?
Well, Elum, I think if you look at the team, their opponent was not on the court but on the practice court, where again the greatest collection of basketball players to ever play the game, and on that court, I think their biggest opponent was each individual, the egos. I think Magic Johnson tells in some of his interviews as well the stories that the stuff that happened, the drama that happened in the practice court, and he's a great storyteller as well. And he says how great Jordan was, and how each individual came their egos to be part of that dream team, because for them playing against another country was not as difficult as playing against each other, and so that's something. And for USA it was again a big thing, the big names playing, and that was something very the fans also wanted to see, because they play expansive game of basketball, and it was brilliant for USA.
Well, from the Dream Team, we'll move on to the media aspect of this Michael Jordan and the NBA and everybody. Even in the last episode, we spoke how media played a very role in Jordan's career, and now here the document highlights on the media's role about Michael Jordan's career. Well, media plays a huge role in any aspect of the world, but when it comes to this, we will talk how it fared Michael Jordan. The first thing is the book that Smith goes on to write, Jordan Rules. I'll move on to Shanaka first. There was a little status that you put on your social media profile as well. I saw that about the book. Do you think that Smith in the documentary says he was an investigative journalist at first? So for me, I think it was a collection of his experience and investigative journalism pieces he did, the backstories, the behind the scenes of the NBA, that he collected them and put them out as a book, specifically about Jordan, saying the Jordan Rules. But my question is, do you think that the documentary is painting a different picture of Michael Jordan in comparison to the book? Maybe is it a reply and a denial of the book?
I don't know whether anybody could really have a true picture of Michael Jordan, because his image is so carefully curated, Lelum. But I don't think he was expecting the book. And I think he expected everyone to kind of fall at his feet adoringly. And Sam Smith's book was actually quite a shock, not just for the basketball world, but personally for Michael as well. So there was a little bit of an uproar about that at the time. And if you remember in the documentary, they say that it was Horace Grant who was actually supplying information to Sam Smith. And Horace Grant, of course, denies it in the documentary. And if you remember, towards the end of the in that era, I think, just after the book was published, Horace Grant was traded to the Orlando Magic. So you could see that there was a little bit of friction. And even though Horace said, "Look, I never did it," didn't prevent him from getting transferred, although he was still pretty much in the prime of his career. So there are a lot of those issues stirring up as well. And I think the book did have a huge ripple effect on the Bulls franchise as well, because Jerry Krause got exposed for who he was, and the fact that there was obviously these backroom backstabbings kind of happening between Krause and Michael Jordan and stuff like that, because Jerry Krause obviously didn't like the fact that he was this 5'5" white guy and he was these 6'6" black guys taking over the entire NBA, and he didn't like the fact that he was given no credit for assembling this, because if you look at the fact that Phil Jackson even came in at a time when he had been assistant and he had been handpicked by Jerry Krause to be assistant, came in and made them a championship-winning franchise. He didn't get enough credit, I think he thought, for all of this stuff. So you never know whether he was feeding information to Sam Smith as well to bring Michael Jordan down a peg or two. So there are all these kind of vested interests and skullduggery in the whole organization. So you can't really say where it came from, but I think the book was necessary, and I think the book paints you the other side of the story. And sometimes when we see public figures, we only see one particular side that they want us to see, but it's always nice to get the side that they don't want you to see as well, because that's also real. But the truth of who they are is probably somewhere in the middle.
Well, interesting. Mafaz, what's your take on this? The book, the document, the facts that discuss this. How do you see this approach?
Yeah, Lelum, as Shanaka said, I believe it had an effect on the Bulls locker room, because this was discussed heavily and how this information was leaked out. So up to date, it's a mystery that the players are pointing out at certain people that this is how this might have gone out. But in a way, I think the player Michael Jordan was all this outfield, off the field incidents which took place in his personal life, and even as a team player, he never backed down on what his goal was. His final goal was to win championships, and in these episodes, if you closely analyze, the end goal was for him to anyhow win. Whatever the situation was, he made sure that he's ready to go out there, and inside those four lines, he was always giving his best. So the Jordan rules, actually what it was, I believe certain I'm sorry. So that's what I said. Yeah, so the end goal was to make sure that they win championships.
We'll move on to the final segment of the show, the three favorite quotes from the fifth and the sixth episode. We've selected the quotes this time to discuss the media aspect and how it played a role in terms of Michael Jordan's career, Chicago Bulls as a team, and then of course as the NBA as well. We'll move on to the first quote. You can see the quotes on your screen as we speak. The first quote, Mafaz, I would like your views and opinion on this. Now, this quote is given by Jordan, an NBC reporter. After he broke out the silence, he stopped talking to the media for a period of 2 weeks when media tried to create a story saying that he had a gambling problem when it was just a hobby that he was doing. The quote is, soon, whenever I walk away from this game, I think that's the only thing that people are going to say was a bad thing about Michael Jordan. And then the reporter questions back, could soon be after this year, and Michael's reply is could be. Now the fact is that after this year he goes on to win 3 more championships and concludes his career, but at the verge of winning the first 3P, the third championship, Michael already had the thought of retirement as well. Mafaz, what are your thoughts in this? Was it a psychological factor? How much of a tough psychological factor it was, this media created problem? And it forced the legend himself to retire at a very early stage if he did. But fortunately for us, he went on to play 4 more years and win 3 more championships.
Yeah, so I think the bigger person Michael Jordan turned out to be, the media was right behind him. I think he was one of the very few players in the NBA who, like, the media was really behind him all the time. So any mistake from such a personality would be a bad impression on the player when it comes to the fans. So I think Michael actually felt a lot of this, and mainly he didn't have any privacy in his life because everywhere he went, the media was there. So, as we say, the media can make or break a player, but I think he never faulted on this. He was always focused on his game, and even during that tough time where he had that gambling problem, which was discussed during this fifth and sixth episodes, I think he was very focused towards the end goal, though the media was letting him down really bad, and he had to stop giving voice cuts to the media, and he went silent. I think his his father actually helped him out during this period. But if you see closely that the Eastern Conference Finals with the Knicks, when they were two games down, I think, and this was the this phase where this incident happened. So even Magic Johnson stated once that the media is going to take this guy out of the NBA, and y'all are going to lose him soon if this is going to happen. So I think that was the reason for him. Mentally, I think he was exhausted, and he also said this, and that was the reason I think he had to take a break after that first repeat, and later on come back and join the Bulls again.
The second quote, I'll move on to Shanaka now. Again, in this documentary, a reporter questions Michael Jordan, asking him, do you have a gambling problem? And then he goes on to say this particular quote. He says, no, because I can stop gambling. I have a competition problem, a competitive problem. And some facts to support that quote is when Magic Johnson goes on to say the inside stories on how they play cards and how competitive he is when they play cards, and how he wants to crush him and make sure that he wins. And that particular storyline is depicted all throughout the entire 6 episodes of the documentary, the competitive edge of Michael Jordan. But media, of course, saw this other way. And then there's also a comment where Michael Jordan gambling $10,000 is just $10 for him because of his earnings in comparatively to a common man. Shanaga, what's your take on this media fiasco?
Well, I think the media is, they're generally normal people like you and I, we are also in the media, but we don't make the huge kinds of money that these basketball stars make. So when somebody goes to a casino and gambles away $10,000, we probably look at it like, oh my God, that's maybe half a year's salary for a family. But for these guys, it's just pocket change. So I think you need to look at it in those two different perspectives. The media are writing from their perspective, and Michael Jordan is looking at it from his perspective. So he thinks, hey, I've got millions of dollars. If I go and want to gamble away 10,000 of those on one night, doesn't make a difference. But I think he's right in the fact that he didn't have a gambling problem as such. But the way he kind of recorded his victories was by taking your money. He seemed to want to kind of take something away from you. For him, winning was not enough. For him, he had to crush you. And that was by taking your money. So that was probably kind of like a metaphor for him, where he wanted to take your energy away from you and make sure he kept it for himself. So even if he was playing cards, I mean, there's so many images of him playing at the stadium with his security guards, and he's just flicking coins against the wall. And these guys make a pittance compared to what he's making, but he would still take $20 off these guys, $40 off these guys, and he would still be playing these low-skill games where you get guys playing on the street, who are like this whole Burua, scene, they would be playing poker like that. So it was low-level stuff that Michael Jordan went to. Here he is, the best athlete of his generation, probably the best athlete ever, global superstar, but still he can't resist actually flipping coins with his security guards in order to take some money off them. So I think that was the problem. and not enough people are talking about that. Just to see, okay, guys, what is this guy on? Why does he feel the need to really do this kind of menial level competition when he's clearly the best in the world, winning Olympic medals, winning championship rings, being a multi-million-dollar athlete? Why is he going and taking money off his own employees? And I think that's the question that the documentary doesn't ask. And I think it's a relevant question for anybody who follows Michael Jordan and for anybody who looks up to Michael Jordan as a role model to ask. But I think we'll talk about that later. But I do think he had a competition problem. I don't think gambling was the sole issue. I think, if you look at the documentary and you look at his eyes being red in most of his interviews, you might think, okay, he's got a drinking problem now, or he's got a cigar in his mouth lots of the time, and you're like, oh, does he have a smoking problem? So I think a lot of people can attribute problems where there aren't any, but I do think that Michael Jordan had a compulsive desire to win, and not just to win, to make sure you knew that you lost to him. And I think that could have gone a little pathological at one stage, especially when you look back at the last couple of episodes where they have the whole bust up with Tony Kukoc. And the fact is that they never met Tony Kukoc in their lives, but he was probably going to threaten Scottie Pippen's place on the roster. So as a result of that, they took all their hatred of Jerry Krause out on poor old Tony Kukoc, who didn't know what hit him. So these guys were malicious. I mean, I don't think you can say that they were, the kind-hearted individuals or anything like that. There was malice in their play, and there was malice in their personalities. And I think you have to have that kind of killer instinct for you to be a sportsman at that level, day in, day out, making sure you're going out there and winning. So I'm not faulting the fact that there was this killer instinct with them, but somehow how it manifested itself sometimes can leave a bit of a bad taste in the mouth.
Just a follow-up question on that, Shanaka. But do you think media should have acted differently, maybe painted a different perspective, been more careful in terms of reporting these facts?
Interesting question, Lelum, because it kind of comes with the territory, doesn't it? I've just watched a documentary on Princess Diana's life and how the paparazzi ended up literally driving her to her death as well. And when you look at it, it's really ugly the way people are hounding someone. And even with Michael Jordan, you do see that. And it really is a horrible kind of sight to see. It's like all these hyenas have gathered around a carcass, It's not a fun sight. But then we have to realize that these guys are also in the media. You and I know that in the media, we need to get access to these sports people. We need to make sure we get their quotes from them. We get the voice cuts. We get the pictures and all that kind of thing. And it's all gotten a lot more professional in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. There are media managers now. You can call ahead, you can book your meetings, all that kind of thing. After match press conferences are much better orchestrated. They're handled very professionally and all that kind of stuff. But in this day and age, in the mid-90s, media managing and making sure that reporters weren't really hounding players was not something that was an issue. And I think it became an issue after these high-profile incidents. But I think players who say that, well, the media are a pain in the backside, they also have to realize that you're selling $130 million of sneakers because this media is taking you to the world. Because there's some guy in China or Japan or Australia or New Zealand or fully across the world who's reading about you because this media guy has made the trip and got the photograph of you. So I think you can't have one without the other. And how you manage it, how you kind of put to it through your agents and how you want to portray yourself to the media, I think that's up to the players. And I think if you're a professional, if you're making so much money off the sport, media is an integral part of that. And you need to be able to handle yourself with the media professionally.
I'm just going to comment on one fact. In my second episode, I did mention about the Princess Diana documentary. There's proof for you. Shanak has watched it. You can watch and know how much of a role that media plays in people's lives. Moving on to Navod, from a media perspective, you being a media personnel, this quote is in the final few seconds of the 6th episode. Michael Jordan goes on to say, "If I had the chance to do it all over again, I would never want to be considered a role model. This is a very, very alarming statement because NBA success was mainly surrounded around Michael Jordan and Commissioner David Stern, who was the NBA commissioner back then, who's highly regarded for the success of the NBA. I think used Michael Jordan really well to make sure that NBA was a global phenomenon. But Michael Jordan seemed to be very tired about it, very exhausted about it, the criticisms and all the stuff that came onto him. So while battling that image of the NBA that NBA created about Michael Jordan and helping the league to function on its own as a global phenomenon, how do you think Michael managed it? And do you think media was kind to him, or should have been more kind to him from a media perspective sense? How would what's your take?
Yes, Larima. So this really shows how much pressure he was under, especially from the media, because he was there. He didn't have any pressure. I mean, on the court playing, because that was his competitive nature. This quote really joins with the two that what Mafaz and Shanaka said. So what the media was hounding him, and he was under a lot of pressure. Again, they were scrutinizing his gambling problems and all those stuff. And the same with I think in the third and fourth episodes we talked about Dennis Rodman as well. He didn't really want to have anything with the media as well, because on the court he was he was giving his best, and off the court he wanted to have his fun, but media was really hounding him. And that's what fame brings you. It brings you that added pressure of to be perfect, but nobody can't be perfect. For all the success, the greatness that Tiger Woods had, he had his weaknesses and as well, and that brought his downfall. And if you look at guys like say Tom Brady, who was the 199th pick in the 6th round of the NFL, he didn't come to the league with that much pressure, but throughout his career he brought himself up to that point. But for guys like Jordan, from the get-go there was a lot of pressure. I'm not saying that Brady doesn't have any pressure from the media or anything during the last few years, but the fact that Jordan was the face of NBA, and that was a lot of pressure. And that was a time when the NBA was going global compared to the times of say Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. But this was a time that it was going global, and people were again writing books, the in-depth aspect of him and the Bulls, and there onwards the media scrutinizing him with his gambling problem. So that was something that was, I think, which led to him saying this quote.
If I can just actually add to that,
yes.
If I can add to that, like sometimes administrators do really put a lot of money in their players, in the sense in terms of bank account balances, because Jordan, as Nawal rightly said, was the face of the NBA. He was a guy who took it outside of the US and just made it a global phenomenon. And you can't have him not playing, and you can't have him having bad press and that kind of stuff. So it's very important for these administrators also, say, what some other sports teams as well, if maybe at a crucial game, if Alex Ferguson had wanted to rest Cristiano Ronaldo and not take him on a particular tour, I think sometimes you get the administrators calling up and saying, "No, hello, he has to play this game. We're taking this game we're taking the team to France or Singapore or to Japan to play an exhibition game, and Cristiano Ronaldo has to be on it." So it's that kind of thing, and I think that's the pressure that really eventually got to Michael, because he took on the mantle of, let me be the face and let me take the advantage that come with it, and some of those advantages are the referees call the foul in your favor, and that's why the title of Jordan rules actually came about, because everybody used to call fouls differently for some players and differently for Michael Jordan. So it was a favored status that he took on, and that was thrust upon him by the league. And ultimately, I think he would what he meant to say probably was that I wouldn't make that choice given a second chance.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. With that, we'll conclude the show for today. Before wrapping up, let me quickly remind you two things. If you didn't catch our first episode and the second episode, you can simply subscribe our YouTube channel and catch them, where we discuss the first and second episode of the documentary in our review first episode, and the third and fourth episode of the documentary in our second review episode about Dennis Rodman. So you can watch those on our YouTube channel. And then we have two more episodes coming up. There are 4 more episodes to be released in the documentary, which means we have 2 more episodes of review to do. So stay locked and stay tuned, and hopefully once we meet you next time, everybody will be safe, and the country and the entire globe will be at better hands. Once again, thank you very much, Shana Kamarasingham, Mafaz Mohideen and Nawod Vijayvikrama, for joining with us today and reviewing these 2 episodes, and hopefully we will catch you all for the next episode as well. And we hope that everybody will take care of themselves and stay safe until we meet you again. Don't forget to keep sharing the passion together with ThePapare.com. Thank you.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the bell icon for our latest content.